All right, just a few minutes to walk through the course syllabus and then also take a peek at the course Blackboard site. Just to kind of give you a view of kind of where we're going in the class and to be more concrete and specific about my expectations when it comes to the work I will be assigning you. All right, so you can pull up the syllabus. It's available on the Blackboard site. It has its own tab on the left. You can see my name. My office is 351. It's on the third floor of RJF Hall, which is formerly called the main building. I'm not going to have scheduled office hours this year or this semester, but if you want to swing by and talk about a paper or an assignment or anything, just let me know. I'm happy to meet with you. My schedule is fairly flexible this semester, and also if you just want to grab me after class, or before class, that works too as well. The best way, of course, to get in touch with me throughout the semester is to use my email address, jeffreywinkle@grcc.edu. All right, so as I briefly talked about in the first video in the orientation folder, the vast majority of what we're going to be covering in this class will be Greek mythology. And with a smattering of others, Mesopotamian, Egyptian. If we have some time at the end, we might get into some Roman mythology. Broadly speaking, the Romans, when they come along and come on the scene historically speaking, they're inheriting and borrowing a lot of things from the Greeks and making it their own. It's a bit of a cliche to say that the Romans, they just took the Greek gods and renamed them. There's a really broad truth to that, but Roman mythology is its own distinct thing. But in terms of kind of the stories and traditions that have been extremely influential around the world, particularly in the Western tradition, you're really talking about the ancient Greeks, and so they're going to get the vast majority of our attention. And so we're going to be reading lots of texts. We're going to put a number of different lenses on mythology. We'll be treating it, of course, as literature, but we're also going to do our best to try to understand what these stories were to the people that produced them, to the culture that ultimately kind of gave birth to these stories, and then and put them into various forms. I think that's one of the best ways to get under the skin of these very important stories, is to try to ground it in the ancient culture that it comes from. So we'll be talking a lot about a myth functioning as theology. We'll be looking at archaeology as a way of kind of understanding who the ancient Greeks were. We'll be considering history and chronology and philosophy. We'll be looking at a number of different genres through which myth has been translated down throughout the years. Epic poetry, that's your Homer, your Hesiod. We'll be doing some drama, ancient tragedy. If we have some time, we'll talk about ancient comedy, prose, poetry. We'll be watching a couple of films that have been deeply influenced by ancient Greek tales. And so hopefully by the end of these 14 weeks, you'll have a very kind of broad perspective that has allowed you to kind of consider, to read, to view myths from many, many different angles, and to see how they still continue to influence the way that we tell stories today. I'm not going to go through all of this in detail. Again, you can read a lot of these things on your own at your leisure. Required materials, I told you on the first video, these are the two texts that I've ordered for the class. Any additional text that I ask you to read, I'll simply put on as PDFs or Word documents on the course Blackboard site. Now it is an online class, and so so how do I consider attendance? I really consider it by the submission of any assignment, and if you're doing it in a timely fashion. I'll be asking you to respond to various readings, to various films along the way, and the quality of those responses really in this first line here, that is I'm considering to be more or less your attendance score. The class itself is worth a total of 1,000 potential points, and I break it down thusly. Yes, the response, forum responses, 150 points. Each week you'll be taking reading quizzes based on specific readings that are outlined in the folders. More on that in just a second. There'll be one formal paper for the class that worth 200 points. No need to worry about that now. I'll give you information as we get into the class. And there'll be two formal tests, a midterm and a final exam. And this being an online class, these will be take-home. And these will be essay-based, not true, false, multiple choice, objective. Those kinds of questions you're going to get in the online reading quizzes. But these will be, I usually give a choice of essays, 2 out of 3, 3 out of 4. that ask you to kind of analyze, compare and contrast, take a thesis and argue for it or against it in a lucid, persuasive essay. But I'll give plenty of heads up and review for that kind of stuff once we get into the course. Just a brief note about my grading scale. As I understand it, a fairly typical grading scale at GRCC is 93% to 100 is a straight A. My grading scale is a little bit more demanding than that. So 950 points to 1,000 points, 95% to 100% would be an A. I don't think that you'll find me a particularly harsh grader. But I do think straight A work should reflect a work that is consistent and above and beyond at the end of the day. So 95% is an A, and then from there down it goes 90s A's, 80s B's, 70s C's, 60s D's, and so on and so forth. So just so that you're not surprised at the end of the course of kind of where we stand. Late assignment policy, generally speaking, I don't accept late work. Like I said in the first video, I will be a little bit more forgiving in these first weeks as people kind of get used to the rhythm of the class and pick up their textbooks and the like. I'll be grading the forum questions and the responses. Each one is worth a potential 25 participation points, and you can read the scale here on how I grade those. And so a complete, thoughtful, insightful, well argued, well laid out, well written answer, 25 points, and then it kind of goes down. It goes down from there. But again, you can read that scale on your own. Here's our course schedule. Again, I'm not going to dwell here too long. We're going to start out talking just generically about what do we even mean by mythology? How is myth different from legend? Is it different from legend? How is myth different than other kinds of literature and stories? We'll be talking about creation stories, and from there we're going to be jumping into Homer, which is more or less where Greek poetry, composed Greek poetry myth really begins. And we'll be reading, like I said in the first video, the whole of the Odyssey together, and that will take a number of weeks. And along the way, we'll be looking at specific gods and goddesses from the Greek pantheon along the way. We'll be looking at particular issues and debates along the way and kind of complicate our readings of these things, hopefully in an interesting and fun kind of way. The first film we're going to watch is Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? This wonderful film that came out in 2000 from the Coen brothers, starring George Clooney. Takes place in the American South in Mississippi in the 1930s, but it is albeit very loose, it is a retelling of Homer's Odyssey. And it's a really fun and really interesting film to view right after having finished up with the Odyssey. And then we'll dedicate a week just to the midterm. Again, it'll be take home, so you'll have the entire week to work on it and submit it. After the midterm, we'll be talking about kind of myth as religion. And we'll be looking at kind of not just these myths as stories, but how do these stories translate into theological belief and practice and ritual? And there's some really interesting kind of secret initiatory rites that were developed around some of these stories that we can still read and unpack. But there's still so many fascinating things that are unknown about them as well. And then we'll do a couple of weeks on Greek tragedy. I'll ask you to read 3 Greek tragedies: Oedipus the King, or Oedipus Rex, as it's sometimes called. It's a Latin title. Euripides Alcestis and Euripides Bacchae. 3 wonderful stories, but particularly important avenues by which these famous stories were translated. The Greeks, one of the many firsts that the ancient Greeks gave to the Western tradition was theater. They, for all intents and purposes, invented theater as we know it. And the vast majority of the plays that they put on and the vast majority of plays that survive were based on these mythological stories. And so it's important to understand how that worked to understand kind of the impact of these tales. And then we'll end with a section on heroes. And we'll kind of do kind of the greatest hits, so to speak. I mean, there are dozens of Greek heroes, major and minor, in the Greek pantheon of hero tales. But we'll be looking at what you might argue are the 4 big ones here. Heracles, for whatever reason, we still know his name better by his Roman name, Hercules, same guy. Heracles is what the Greeks called him. Theseus, Jason, and then we'll finish with Perseus. And these stories, of course, have had a tremendous impact on modern storytelling. You can find, of course, very obvious elements of Perseus and others in stories like Percy Jackson, right? The Rick Riordan series, which is directly based and mined from Greek mythology, or even a series like Harry Potter, Maybe some of you know that J.K. Rowling was a classics major in college, and so she knew these stories very well. And so when she mapped out the Harry Potter narrative arc, lots of these Greek mythological hero narrative structures are embedded in those very important and influential stories. I mean, most of the spells in Harry Potter are Latinate. Again, Rowling kind of giving away her education there. All right, I'll leave you to read the kind of the college policies and such. This is kind of standard procedure on any syllabus you get these days. But do let me know if anything is unclear or if you have questions about this. All right, let's also now then turn briefly to the course Blackboard site. So if you pull this up, and again, if you're watching this video, you have pulled this up, you'll find a welcome message here. The most important link to attend to right away is this weekly assignments link, and you'll see week 1 available. And so at 11:59 the next Sunday, the folder for the next week will open up. So at 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, September 5th, the next folder will open up with another week's work. And again, as we get into this, I'll be expecting that you will be able to complete the work in that folder by 11:59 p.m. of the Sunday before the next week opens up. So if it just open up the first folder here, please complete all assignments by 11:59 p.m. Sunday. Again, I'll be a little bit forgiving early on, but do your best. Ask you to view a video lecture here, to read the first 3 chapters in the classical myth textbook. So again, it's in your best interest to get these books as soon as you can. They're available at the bookstore. But again, search the web, find yourself a good deal. There's lots of used copies of these things out there, as these are texts that are very commonly used in classes like this. So I have a lecture up on YouTube, which you can access and view that first. Read the classical myth textbook, the first 3 chapters, and then take these reading quizzes. Now, a word about these reading quizzes. And so when you open up the quiz and you begin, it's timed. And so generally speaking, I think you'll find you'll have plenty of time to do these texts. Usually I give you kind of 2 minutes per question, which I think is quite generous. But I do time them to to prevent you just sitting there with a book and kind of frantically looking for answers, rather than sitting down and doing the reading properly and then taking the quiz. With these quizzes, I'm not out to trick you. I'm not going to write questions that are from the footnotes of the text or obscure details from the text. These reading quizzes are just simply meant to test basic comprehension of the readings, and I time them to kind of keep you honest, to encourage you to do the readings well, and then once you sit down, take the quiz. I think you'll find this plenty of time, and if you do the readings decently, you're not going to have any problems with these. You can take the quizzes twice. Just know that the software will average the scores of your 2 attempts. I have it set up that it should show you, once you're done with an attempt on a quiz, kind of how many you got wrong and how many you got right. It won't tell you the right answer. But you can use that information to decide if you want to take it a second time. Obviously, if you ace it the first time, there's no reason to take it a second time. But whatever you choose, it'll send that score to your to the grade book in Blackboard. Let me know if you have trouble with these things. It's software. Software crashes, machines fail. It's very easy for me to go in and to delete an attempt and to open things back up for you. Just let me know, but just do so in a timely fashion so we can stay on top of these things. All right. The rest of it is fairly intuitive and self-explanatory. So, search through the links here. I'll have kind of information for the paper up fairly soon, although that won't be something that's due until the very end of the class. But do let me know if things aren't working, if things are crashing, or if anything is unclear. All right. See you later.